which we can ensure that the future will be secure and our privacy will be protected. I'm pleased to welcome Галит Ариэль. She will tell us about the social citizenship and the world which we live in right now. Hello and welcome, Галит.
Hello, everybody in Russia. Lovely to see you virtually and for you to see me all the way from Canada at the moment. Do I start? Yes, I guess I start. So I prepared a presentation for you that will talk about our digital footprint and basically how will spatial computing and augmented reality would change the way that we interact with physical spaces, with our bodies, and with society at large. So welcome, and let's begin. Sorry, share. So we're living in a real groundbreaking era. We're really reaching the final frontier because everything we know about computers and technology is about to change completely. And with it, the way we understand the world, ourselves, and our interactions with it. So first of all, I want to introduce myself. My name is Галит Ариэль. I define myself as a space explorer since during my professional career, I have been researching aspects of designing for physical, social, and digital spaces, trying to understand the common and different qualities they have, which is extremely relevant today, especially that when we're sitting at home and trying to interact with the world digitally. So my background is as creative. I started off as a spatial and industrial designer. I'm a techno-futurist, which means that I focused in looking at potential futures of technologies and how they will change our society and culture in return. I'm an author. I write articles about the intersection between technology, humanity, society, and the arts. And I am definitely a nerd and a very proud one. And if you want to know how proud I am in being a nerd, my highlight of my life was giving a TED Talk, but it wasn't a TED Talk that made me so excited. It was the ability to give a TED Talk as a Trekkie with a Trekkie badge and talk about how Star Trek, the TV series, actually changed my perception as a child about how we can create better technologies and better societies with technology. So this is a map of the internet in 1971. That was it. This was the grid. And today it looks nothing like it. We definitely can't map the internet anymore on one slide, probably not even in the room you're at. I don't know if you can map it at all, because the internet has been decentralized and now lives in many devices, in many platforms and networks. And we're living truly, as Jacques Ellul framed in 1967, in a technological civilization. Our systems, our economy, our politics, our society, and our identities are all tech infused. Everything around you, everything in the room around you is touched by technologies, and even every cell in your own bodies. Technology has an impact on our lives that is undeniable and irreversible. But before we head to technology, I think we need to understand how we interact with space in general. So there are traditionally two types of spaces. One is the B space, the physical space. This is where we are biologically prone to get input from. We are physically born into the space. We use our bodies and our senses to decipher reality. But there's also another space, which is the mental space. So beyond the mechanical interactions of the physical space, we also have the best biological machine ever made, which is our brains. And our brains take these physical inputs, the tactility, the sounds, the things we see, and they decipher them into a mental picture of the world. And this is how we understand the world around us and capture these impressions and don't have to relearn them all the time. The beauty of it is that as humans, we are really able to understand the world, to remember, to take it with us, to communicate it to further generations, to understand it deeper. But it also means that we are also prone to cognitive biases that are warping our perception of reality. Some are good and some are bad. So for example, the way we project our current mindset into past or future event. If you're in a good mood, you are more likely to think about past events or future events in a better way. The way we adopt herd thinking to avoid mistakes. We learn from the behaviors of others so we don't have to repeat it ourselves, but it also means we follow the herd because we trust it. So there are actually 24 cognitive biases that shape the way we see the world at any given time. And it's very hard to detach from them. And we probably shouldn't, because again, they're also very positive. But when people can learn and twist these biases, it also means they can lure us into a state of misunderstanding and misinterpreting the world, but also miswanting, which means that making us believe we want something different than we do. A lot of marketing people and advertisement people are playing a little bit on these biases in order to persuade us to buy things or consume things or trust things. Again, not necessarily negative. The issue is that right now, as we live in this technological society, we have digital space, which is third space. It's the space between the near and the far. It's what actually mediates between the majority of our interactions of physical space and mental space. And because digital space is boundless and malleable more than the other two places, we can actually create fantastic and infinite input lenses, devices, and communication through digital interaction. And our brain's neuroplasticity makes for an amazing ability to adapt to the world, but also, again, makes us susceptible to be influenced by such external factors. And the fantastic and infinite nature of digital realm influence us wider and deeper than any other means in the human past. This relatively new space actually became so deeply influential in altering the way we interact with the world that we now define ourselves with a partial digital self. So our digital identity, who I am, and am I loved or liked, is so entrenched in our identity that it's very hard for us to separate it. And we're seeing how a lot of research have been made into social media and self-representation and how to be able to detach yourself or recontextualize what you think about yourself versus what you think you are, how you think you are seen by yourself and by others through digital lenses. There are other examples of how we change our behaviors according to technological interaction. So, for example, this is actually a traffic light. This little little green stripe on the bottom of the pavement there is actually a projected street light that is now in the Netherlands, and applied also in Tel Aviv. It's a test because they figured out that people no longer look upwards in order to cross the street or get visual confirmation that they're allowed to, but they look downwards because they're on their phones. So we're already starting to change our physical environment according to our digital behaviors and rituals. And that's, again, debatable whether it's good or bad, but what is true is that it is happening. And if these changes are already happening in physical space, these changes are even going to be more magnified once spatial computing is truly integrated into physical space. So before I start showing you some cases of wonderful and worrying applications of technology and spatial computing, I want to do this 1 minute slide just to explain why I'm focusing on spatial computing and especially AR. So in the virtual continuum, which is actually a chart that was created by Milgram and Kishinu 30 years ago, they talk about the difference between all the physical and digital interactions. And they're defined by what type of content is coming. Is it physical in nature or digital in nature, and where it is experienced? So on the two edges of the spectrum, we have the physical reality, which means we have physical content experience in a physical space. And on the very other side, we have virtual reality, which means we have completely digitally generated content, which is experienced in digital realm. So if you play a video game using a VR headset, you're completely in virtual space. Everything in between is called mixed reality because it mixes a little bit of one and a little bit of the other. And within that, there are two core technologies, although today everything is blurring, which are augmented virtuality and augmented reality. With augmented virtuality, we actually capture physical spaces and add them into a digital space, so the 360 video. So we actually augment, we add and amplify the virtual space via physical content. And augmented reality, which I am very passionate about, is where we actually add and layer digital layers in real time into the physical space. So we have digital content experience in the physical space. And this is crucial because, as I explained before, our core understanding of the world comes from our physical presence in it and our interaction with it, and with all the mental build-ups that we have culturally and personally put into that. So when you add a digital layer to it, it really truly augments our reality and makes us understand it and believe it much quicker and much better. We are truly moving into the age of spatial computing, which means that via augmented reality, we can map, understand, and react to physical spaces. The virtual world is no longer confined to a screen, but it becomes really three-dimensional and implemented within the three-dimensional physical space. We won't need smart objects because our entire space, our entire environment around us would be able to be layered with smart virtual interactions. We will be able to interact with data and content through any surface, through any gesture, through any virtual skin that we will apply. And this is where atoms, the physical atoms, the mental neurons, and the digital pixels will meld into this new hybrid space, which will be, in my mind, bigger than the internet or any other technological innovation, because this will be the real World Wide Web. The world itself will be connected and interactive digitally, mentally, and physically. And reality will become a playground for our imagination. We'll be able to shift ideas of presence and materialities, space and representation, a literal digital dream time. And that's all exciting and amazing, but and I'm saying, but these hybrid spaces will have different effects. So I'll start with the positive effect, with my passion. What happens if everything goes right? So first of all, as I mentioned, we will interact, touch, and manipulate surfaces in a different way, because all of a sudden, every surface and every substance will be able to become a digital interface. Whether it's physical or not, we'll be able to three-dimensionally control and manipulate digital interactions through the way we move in space, through the way we gesture and we touch. Here is a great example of just drawing with AR means. This is, of course, a magic wand that draws with AR. So through the lens, you can see the swirls, the digital swirls this woman is making, which is already quite amazing. What it also means is that we'll have third space everywhere. So all of a sudden, and this is a Snapchat lens that already exists, buildings and architecture around us will be able to move and reshape itself. So the way we'll see the world will be different. This is another great example by a studio in the Netherlands, Wonderments, that is talking about how we're going to play with virtual and mixed virtual physical means. So basically what they've done is they're created this virtual play car, and that follows a path that is drawn on the pavement. So all of a sudden, you can virtually play a race, a digital game race in physical space. The other thing that is quite amazing, and I think a lot of people neglect to consider, is that augmentation is not just about adding, it's also about duplicating and subtracting. So here's a great example of how you will be able to copy and paste physical objects that are around you and all of a sudden multiply them and be able to change your environment accordingly. It also means that the idea of physical boundaries are going to change completely, because this extended space would erase our mental and physical borders. So this digital artist, Nancy Baker Cahill, actually creates public spaces, public art in AR that you can pull and place wherever you want. And this example is actually creating digital art that was pulled across the American-Mexican border, because digital art has no boundaries, and digital placemaking is a new tool to enable us to share and collaborate and create new context in public spaces. Our whole perception of ourselves will change. So from just being, we can become whatever we want. We've already been using Snapchat and Instagram filters for a while, and we are playful with the way we think we are and we can be, either by beautifying or distorting. I even created a lens that allows people to be me, because I don't care. But it is a way to experiment in our sense of self, our gender, our presence, perhaps our race, and the way we want to be seen with the world. Right now, we're limited to a screen, but in the future, we will be able to 24/7 be represented as something that we choose to be. So hopefully I won't have to put makeup when I go in the street, because my lens will take care of it for me. But again, we will also be able to extend whatever perception we have of beauty and self. We're also seeing a new era of virtual being and presence, transhumanism. All these images in this slide are of digital beings. All of them are digital beings. None of them is real. And yet they have massive online following in social media. They have their own agents. They have their own product lines. The new beings are becoming virtual. So today, it's no longer about the frontiers of science. This is not the issue. It's about the frontiers of humans and humanity, which is great, but also humans are weird. So here's an example of a well-intended aim of a devoted Spanish woman that truly wanted to restore the damaged picture of the damaged fresco of Jesus on the left, and she redrew it herself. And it's kind of a funny execution, but it also needs to remind us that with all the good intentions of creating perfect technologies, human beings tend to twist and break them. And we end up having, let's say, less than desirable outcomes. So if we don't design for that, we are dooming ourselves for very sad consequences. And a lot of it is related to the way we use data, and we need a lot of data capturing and spatial data capturing for these technologies, and the rise of the digital authoritarianism. The rise of the digital haves, because those that have access to that data, this biometric data, this personal data of individuals, of masses, have the upper hand in being able to, again, manipulate entire cultures, entire social narratives, and the mindsets of individuals. Shoshana Zuboff really writes well in The Age of Surveillance Capitalism about how we've subverted devices and algorithms, not just to read and decipher conscious and subconscious actions in the present, but also to be able to nudge our behaviors in the futures. So if that happens, what kind of agency do we have as citizens and as individuals? If somebody is already planting in my mind the way that I will behave in the future, our agency is taken away from us. We already saw it through the manipulation of social anxiety. Most of the social media platforms are building on the fact that we have social comparisons. We compare ourselves to other individuals and situations of people in our society in order to see where we stand and learn from it. The issue is that really depends on what mechanism we have to compare ourselves. And when these mechanisms are built on loves and likes and some sort of like visual invigoration, we tend to maximize it. And this is where we see our physical visual culture exploding and our perception of our bodies demoting. So people have never been so unhappy about the way they look and the way they live as they have before social media. Instead of becoming this wonderful social shareable context, it became a competition, a competitive and distorted version of society. And this is not just coincidental, it's actually built into these mechanisms. It's under the persuasive tech building on our dopamine economy, which means that we need this approval and we have a biological reward to it. We have a dopamine release whenever somebody likes us online or follows us online. The thing is, it's short-lived. This dopamine economy, this dopamine system in our brain is actually built to make us keep looking for food, keep ourselves safe. And it's been subverted into being liked online. So we keep looking for this external approval. And so many businesses and tech platforms are built around our dopamine addiction and obsession. And it doesn't actually give us value long-term. Another thing that's happening is that we're stepping into this era of smart cities and smart environments. And these environments and cities are actually not designed by governments, by big tech companies that step into the physical space. And then all of a sudden, they have access to all our personal information, who we meet in physical space, and how we do it. For example, Sidewalk Labs in Toronto was planning to build a whole smart corridor, and then it was found out that Alphabet, which means Google, is behind it. What it would mean is that if you walk through this area, Alphabet will be able to capture all the digital data you carry around you in your phone, not directly. They'll be able to understand who walks there and how, and who you interact with and why, and basically take away your ability to understand how you behave. They're able to actually, through their data, change the entire mindset. In Buffalo, New York, Google basically changed names of neighborhoods because, you know, they liked it better, and all the people living them had to kind of like now become this other name, this other neighborhood, because Google decided, and that's how we mediate the way we understand the world around us. In New York City, the Vessel landmark that sits in a public space is actually copyrighted to Hudson's Yards, which means that if you take a selfie there, they own the image, right? They've now changed it because of outbreak, but I use this image every single time I give a talk, and I wait for them to sue me, because the fact that now, because of having an object in the background, I don't own this image is very disturbing for me. And it's very disturbing to our digital rights on everyday actions. We're also seeing how in China in 2018, which is now widespread, they're using augmented reality visors for cops to identify citizens walking down the street and immediately mark their behavior as positive and negative and give them social credit. So if you jaywalk and cross the street, not in a crossing pad, your boss might get a notification and you might get fined directly. The problem with that is that now we are being observed every time we walk down the street. So the novel 1984 is happening right now. And with COVID, it's happening even more because we're giving consent to have contact tracing because it's for the better good. And I'm not saying it's not for the better good, but I don't think we're having the opportunity to debate what it truly means and to decide whether or not we want this to be part of our everyday lives. In Singapore, the masters of technology became slaves. So Boston Dynamics robots are now physically surveying the public parks and spying and controlling the traffic flow of people there. So from the masters of technology, from digital gods, we truly became digital slaves. We have devices that can now see through walls and materials. This is just the OnePlus Pro camera that somebody found out that sees through plastic and cloth, which means that even in our private spaces, we can be seen and looked at. There are even technologies that allow Wi-Fi routers and even your computer fans to be able to decipher the 3D environment around them and understand how many people are in the room and what's going on there. And so I believe that rephrasing Vladimir Putin's phrase that he who controls AI would control the world, I believe that he who controls AR would control the world. He who controls the way we are seeing and really interacting in a physical space via digital means, whether virtual or physical or mechanical, will be able to shape entire cultures and mindsets. Because I don't know if you know, the most powerful people in the world right now are the heads of the technology companies. And I don't remember voting for them as they design and shape these digital tools, they design and shape our interactions and our realities. And we're going into a mode that is really, really difficult, where we are bombarded with so much information and mediums, and the persuasion mechanics integrated into them really change the way that we consider data as the truth, and subverting it into what is true. So we tend to take fragments of data and think it is a truth, but it's not. It's hard for us and even impossible for us to understand and comprehend the truth, but we still need it. And social media and these digital tools that are being subverted are changing our perception between what is true and what is the actual truth put together. So much so that, surprisingly, even though we have more knowledge than we ever had before, we also never have seen so many conspiracy theories. And this is an image of how British anti-5G crowds are demonstrating against 5G because according to them, it created COVID, which is of course ridiculous and untrue. And this is the real identity theft, the theft of our knowledge and how it's represented, the theft of how we are behaving and how we are allowed to behave in physical space, the theft of how our minds understand the world and how we interact with others. And as we move into more sophisticated tools of deep fakes, I think we'll have to reconsider how we actually understand reality, where we have to have a verification code for reality because we won't be able to distinguish in our own eyes what is really true and what is not. And what happens when people start to take away things. This is a lens I created with a computer vision friend of mine, where we just blur out every man in the crowd. Because what if I don't want to see men, or what if men don't want to see women anymore? What if we can't see things that actually exist in real life? This will be the death of shared truths and realities. And this is the true definition of a crisis. A crisis, Antonio Gramsci defined this beautiful phrase: a true definition of a crisis is when the old is still alive and the young cannot be born. And we are in this point, this tipping point between the digital and physical hybrid, between the old knowledge and the future knowledge. And we need to understand and give this transition time in order for it to be positive. So here's a quick recipe for a better future, and it's not a sourdough bread recipe. So I believe that the perfect cake is 3-layered, or at least a perfect social cake. We have the foundation layer, which is society. We have culture and economy that then is built through a healthy society. And with that, we have policy and governance that kind of like are there to bind all. Technology is that pink stuff, this filling, this beautiful tool that binds them all together and then elevates the cake. So I think we really need to find a way to balance these 3 layers and to make sure that technology is really the tool between them and doesn't overtake it. Because we all have a right for a shared reality. Yeah, we all have a right for a shared reality and to have digital inclusion for all. So we have to ensure we have free access to knowledge and resources. This is the basic right for civic agency. The world belongs to us all. That was it. Thank you very much.